And I told myself that it always seemed pretty weird to me to work for 5 days and be off for two. So I said that I would work for 2 days and be off for five because it just, to me, it made more sense that the world should be that way.
Welcome to the Doctor's Eyes Only podcast, brought to you by Vestia Personal Wealth Advisors, where we are on a mission to help the highest caliber physicians achieve wealth that matters.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Doctor's Eyes Only podcast. I am your host, Lauren Oschman, and I am here today with Dr. Kristine Goins. I'm very excited for this conversation, and I think you'll understand why here in a minute. Dr. Kristine Goins is a board-certified integrative adult and pediatric psychiatrist and a digital nomad. Having served in several healthcare settings and various leadership positions within academic centers, Dr. Goins has witnessed firsthand the impact that burnout, stress, and work-life imbalance can have on physicians' lives. Motivated by a desire to really make a difference, Dr. Goins founded Nomad MD, where she empowers doctors to achieve a balanced and fulfilling life where they can work less and live anywhere. So those longtime listeners of the show will probably recognize a connection to our concept here at Vestia of wealth that matters. So I'm so excited to have this conversation and talk with a doctor who's made big life changes to really embrace wealth that matters in her own life. Welcome, Kristine.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. Okay, so first you have to tell us, where are you actually joining from today? Because you don't have you do have a home, but in the traditional sense, you are home changes pretty frequently.
Yes. I'm currently in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And how long have you been there?
And I've been in Joburg for a month now.
Okay.
Yes.
And you'll be there for how long?
I'll be here for another week. Then I'll spend a month in Cape Town and then another month in Durban.
Oh, that's so cool. We were just talking before we went live about some of what you've been able to do in the last month in South Africa, and you're still working as a psychiatrist. So I guess let's back up. Tell us your origin story. Like, how did you become Nomad MD?
I wanted to be a doctor since I was 8 years old. So it was a really long time coming. But I also wanted to be a traveler since I was a teenager. I used to read books by an author named Eric Jerome Dickey, and he wrote these fictional books about Black professional polyglots that just traveled all over the world. And I really internalized that. So I was always trying to figure out how I was going to live this life of traveling mixed with this life of medicine and being a doctor. But anyone who's in medicine knows, once you get into that industry, it tends to kind of absorb, a lot of your time, your energy, your financial resources, and sometimes really to the exclusion of everything else. And so I always try to find little bits of ways of getting the travel in. They give us a summer off the first year after med school. I spent that summer in Costa Rica living with a family. In fellowship, I literally went to a program that guaranteed me a month away. And I spent that month in Nepal in a Tibetan Buddhist monastery studying meditation. And I was just always trying to weave it in. And so when I became an attending, finally, I was like, okay, now I'll be free and I'll be able to do all of the things. And I found that it was still it was even more really responsibility, time that was just taken away in terms of my free time was spent with documentation, unpaid work. It was really exhausting, and it really led me to a point of burnout. And that led me to a point of depression, really, because I was just exhausted and I wasn't doing the things that really mattered to me. You talk about the wealth that matters, right? It's, you can have that financial resource and that financial security, but not necessarily be living the most liberated, prosperous life in terms of all the things that truly bring you joy and peace of mind. And when I really noticed that, I knew it was time to make a shift. And so without telling anyone, I booked a one-way ticket to Colombia. A couple weeks later, I put in my 4 months notice.
Oh my gosh.
I left.
Wow. So, okay, so I'm curious, in that first contract as an attending, do you remember how much vacation time you had in that contract?
I think technically there was 4 weeks, and when I had, like, a really amazing boss, and when I spoke to him about it, he was like, "I take 6 weeks, and I don't think you should take anything less." And so technically I had 6 weeks, but I don't think most people were necessarily, like, utilizing that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is interesting because there is a lot of PTO that goes unused among employees in America, certainly doctors, because there's so much more wrapped in it too, where it's like you have this commitment that you've made to your patients. You also have a commitment that you've made to your partners. And, those that where it's like, if you just check out for 6 weeks, it's not lost on you that means everyone else is working harder to keep up. And so then you feel like you need to work harder when you come back, or you feel like you need, there's a lot of anxiety, I think, around time off too, that I've heard from a lot of physicians over time. So it's not always enough just to be like, oh, I got this contract with 6 weeks of vacation. Number one, that's not a ton. And number two, it's not like you're going to be able to jet off somewhere for a month very realistically.
Exactly. And so even though I think in some ways it was more generous than maybe what a lot of physicians get, because I was using my 6 weeks, but it still wasn't my dream. And I really wanted to let my dream. So.
Yeah. Okay. So you book this one-way ticket to Colombia. You give your 4 months notice. What happens next?
So I had from training, I automatically started working in academia, but I also had my own PLLC where I would work for myself 1 day a week. And so when I quit and left academia, I was then working for myself 2 days a week. And I told myself that it always seemed pretty weird to me to work for 5 days and be off for 2. So I said that I would work for 2 days and be off for 5, because it just, to me, it made more sense that the world should be that way.
I love that you flipped it. Like, I've thought, oh, maybe like 4 and 3. You're like, no, like 2 and 5, but the other way.
Yeah. Like, it just made more sense. And so that's what I've been doing since I left. And that's given me just the time freedom that was needed and necessary to just focus on myself, what I really wanted, what mattered most to me in terms of life, travel, meeting new people, learning about different cultures, perfecting different languages, just growing from the inside, and I think in many ways it's made me a much better physician.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so you work 2 days a week. This is remotely, like you do visits and things?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you work 2 days a week remotely. You live all the non-work life 5 days a week. Paint the picture of, because there are a lot of doctors that are like, this is a pipe dream. And we'll talk about, because I know, that was one of my first questions to you. Well, how do you do this if you have to work and, you have to go into an OR, you have to, things like that. So we'll get to that. But first, paint the picture for me. You talked about the burnout and the depression that you got to in that first attending job. Even with a decent chunk of vacation, just feeling like you weren't actually living a fulfilling life and chasing your passions and really feeling that wealth that matters, to today, where you found kind of a way to balance things that seems like it is very much in line with what is fulfilling to you and kind of what you were made for. So paint the picture of, kind of that liberation on the other side.
I think for me, the true benefit is not feeling a sense of urgency in everything that I do. I think it really changes your relationship to your work, to your passion, and to your patients when you're not showing up even really in obligation. because once I was able to experience time, location, and financial freedom, is like I show up to the work with a different kind of excitement. Like I'm not here for the money. I'm not here because I need to be. I'm here because I want to be, because this is like part of my gift that I'm sharing with the world. And just having the space to do that, having the um, ability to just have moment to moment awareness. There's something really interesting about moving to different places. You're always in a place of freshness. And so I can't just slip into comfort. I have to keep my presence and awareness about what's going on. And that really helps me to also tap into a lot of creativity. And that's where Nomad MD came from. Like it takes space and time to really tap into your imagination and innovation. You can't do that from an exhausted, overworked space. And so I think there's a lot of doctors who are really struggling in burnout and exhaustion, but they can't figure the way out of it because you need actually space and time to be able to figure out your way out.
Yeah, that's so true. And I love how you put that, because part of that is like, for you is a major life shift, but part of that is like a mindset shift of I have to do this to I get to do this. This is where I have to be to this is where I want to be. And even just that, I mean, I almost feel a little more pep in my step for this very mundane Wednesday after hearing you say that, because I'm like, oh, yes, I do want to be here. And I think it's very easy to get caught up in the, like, these are all the things I have to do, and these are all the things I have to keep up with, and these are the people that I need to call and help, and all of that. And you're so right. I actually saw a quote recently that was right along those lines you're talking about, where it was like, if you don't take the space, then the ideas aren't going to come. And sometimes it takes slowing down to go back to speeding up. And so I think I love that observation. So talk a little bit about, because you said that's where Nomad MD came from, was kind of that space. So what is Nomad MD?
Yeah. So Nomad MD is a program that I have for doctors who are really looking to work less and live anywhere. And it looks different for each doctor, but it's really the ability to live a life of more fulfillment and balance by having time and location freedom. And it's something that I think not many of us doctors have experienced. And for me, I have found that time and location freedom helped me to fast track to financial freedom. And I think a lot of people stay stuck because they are worried about finances. They are worried about money. And so that was like the number one fear I had when I was leaving, well, what am I going to do with my retirement accounts? And what about student loans? And what about all these things? And I decided at that point that I would flip that fear on its head by asking myself, how could you use travel to fast track your way to financial freedom? Like, how could this actually be your approach to getting what you want by living the life that actually feels most aligned for you? And so when I started looking into strategies to do that, it just became really like incredible how quickly I was able to make what I wanted, what I needed as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like you had a problem to solve. So it's like, okay, I want to do this. There are all these issues. There are all these problems that present themselves first.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the problems keep someone from pursuing the idea at all. For you, you were like, okay, problem to solve. And it sounds like you were able to solve that by figuring out how to monetize maybe in some other ways that were not traditional for you as a full-time attending physician.
So there were a number of approaches. I mean, of course, using like geographic arbitrage, being able to live in other countries that had a lower cost of living while still having my U.S. currency, right? Being able to utilize credit card efficiency. I was telling a group in one of my workshops last night, when I came from a trip from the U.S. with my family to here in Joburg, I pay $8 for my business class flight to Joburg. And so, just the ability to use some of those strategies, having your own business and being able to utilize, the different retirement accounts, doing mega bag hour offs, and all of those things that really help you to give to yourself first. Really, it really makes a big difference using, tax strategies like the foreign earned income exclusion, and being able to save on taxes that way. Like all of those things really add up.
Yeah. No, that's great. And actually, we, funny enough, have an interview coming up on the podcast with Points and Miles Doc. And so if that's an area that people are interested in, we'll have an episode coming that's all about credit card points and miles and how to make the most of that, which I'm really excited about. I think, and part of the reason that you and I connected was because the way that we do financial planning at Vestia very much starts with like, what is it that's important to you? And I think a lot of times when people think about having that conversation with a financial advisor, it's like, when do you want to retire? And for us, we have people sit down and kind of rank order some priorities and talk to us about them. And by far, the number one priority that gets chosen as like the most important of everything that we have people look through is spending time with the people I care about. And there are a number of more priorities that are kind of focused on this like life fulfillment. And it's funny because those priorities almost always rise to the top for people, where it's like in their top 5 kind of life priorities, there's going to be 2 or 3 of these things that have nothing to do with money, nothing to do with work. And a lot of times I think those get kind of pushed down because it's like, well, I don't have time to figure those out. Whereas you're saying, if you embrace those and then you think about, like, how do I build a financial strategy that's going to allow me to live this way? Not like work myself into the ground so that I can live this way someday, but build a strategy so I can actively live this way now. I'm helping a 2-physician household. They're working on making things work so that they can do a 6-month sabbatical, like overseas in a year or so from now. And when that first came up as an idea for them, they were like, we'd love to take our family. They have 2 kids. They were like, we'd love to do this. They had picked out the place that they thought they would like to go. When this first came up as an idea, it was almost like, but we probably can't make that possible. We probably can't make that happen. Versus now, fast forward, we've been talking about it for a couple of years, and they've built the confidence over time because we've kind of looked at the numbers. We've looked at how all of it will work. And so I'm very interested to see for them on the tail end of that, like when they come back, is that something that they will they will have gotten over that initial kind of anxiety and they'll want to do more of it? Or will it be kind of okay, we did it and now we're back to, I think it'd be hard to go do something like that for 6 months, then come back to like the pace of life in the US as a 2-physician household.
Yeah. It's kind of like Monday blues.
Yeah. What, probably times 100 or 1,000 or something. So I teased this earlier because this was one of my top of mind questions when you started talking about Nomad MD. So if I'm not someone who can do telehealth 2 days a week and get paid for that, if I am someone who needs to be in an OR somewhere, or I need to be doing procedures in a hospital or a surgery center or something like that, is this kind of time and location freedom still something that's possible for me?
100%. Like a lot of my clients are anesthesiologists, hospitalists, like people that you would think only can be in certain settings. But the truth is, if you are a physician or any kind of doctor, then you automatically have transferable skills that can be utilized in a digital remote platform or even in other industries, whether you are doing coaching, whether you are doing consulting, whether you decide to do locums, whether you decide to do other kinds of experiences like, medical legal consulting. There's literally so many different areas, or even if you decide to do a hybrid, where doctors really still want to keep up their procedural or surgical skills, but then they can really construct their practice or their work in a way where they spend certain months in the OR and then certain months focusing on their more remote or consultation part of their practice. And so it really offers them the freedom and the flexibility to do both.
So what would the process look like if I come to you and I am, say, an anesthesiologist or, one of these kind of more, you have to be somewhere physically in order to do, like, to administer anesthesia to a patient. What would that look like to kind of discover, like, what would that process look like working with you?
Yeah. So in the beginning, the first piece is really gaining clarity on what exactly you want. What do you want your ideal life abroad or even in the US to look like, and I think without that clarity, it makes moving forward really difficult. So that's always our number one first step. And I think once docs get really, really clear on what they want, then it unfolds pretty quickly that they've actually had this dream the whole time that they wanted to do like lifestyle medicine in their practice. Like things will come out of that shows there was this fear of changing from what they were trained in or what they always knew in terms of doing it just this way and no other way. To there's this newness, this other approach, this whether it's like entrepreneurial or just wanted to do something different. And we actually work on some of the fear and the mindset, some of the self-limiting thoughts that come up around those changes and gradually help them to move in that direction. A lot of times it means moving into maybe remote positions or starting a business that either has a remote arm or is 100% virtual.
Got it. So we're right back to that problem-solving mentality where it's like, okay, the fact that in order that you think right now to make money as an anesthesiologist, you need to be somewhere physically with the patient. That's a problem to solve. What are the other skills that you have? What is exciting to you? And then you mentioned kind of the hybrid or locums or something like that. I know some doctors, like I work with some doctors who have a locums arrangement where they work maybe 1 week a month, make a lot of, if you're willing to go anywhere and depending on your specialty and all of that sort of thing, the locums, like a week in locums can be very lucrative and can then fund the rest of the month in some cases. And so I love where you're kind of like, let's open our mind to the possibility. And so instead of feeling stuck in this life where you're kind of like, is this it? That old "gotta make the donuts" commercial, from forever ago. I know my dad, who's an interventional cardiologist, he would always that would be his joke. He'd be like, "Gotta make the donuts." And that guy's so tired. And every morning he's getting up and he goes and he makes the donuts. And then, there's one day where he gets up, he goes to make the donuts. He turns right back around and he goes, "Oh, I already made the donuts." He's on the hamster wheel to that degree and thinking instead of I'm stuck, got to make the donuts because that's how I support my family. It's like opening your mind to this possibility of what is wealth that matters to me? And is there a way that I could make this possible? And even if it's not right now, maybe it's, can we come up with a plan where you feel confident making a transition in 2 years, in 5 years? I'm sure that there's a lot of flexibility if it's like, we know where we're trying to go.
Yeah.
So let's do something in order to work toward that and going at a pace that seems reasonable. But I love that you're out here living it. You've worked with doctors who are living it. And so the encouragement of, trust me, this is possible, has to be so helpful when you are talking to a group that hasn't seen this modeled really in previous generations of medicine.
Yes, absolutely. And so part of it, and I work with docs from left training, early career, all the way up until, retirement is soon. And so it's a very broad range of docs, but for all of them, we've all been trained in the same way. It's follow this algorithm. These are the choices. And so if you're stepping outside of the box, there is some mindset shifting that has to be part of that process in order for you to feel like you're not crazy for making this decision to not do what you've been told.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that because ultimately we get one version of life. I think about this frequently. Like we get one shot. We don't know how long we have. And so that's the other thing that I think about, sometimes when it's like, and sometimes when doctors come to me, they'll be like, well, I'm going to work forever. Like I like what I do. I'm going to work till forever. Mm-hmm. And I love hearing that on one hand, because I'm like, if you love what you do so much that you could see yourself doing it till you're 70, that's awesome. I also wonder, and you made this point earlier, where it's like medicine has a tendency to overwhelm life.
Yeah.
And so if that's the way that you're working until you're 70, you don't know how long you get, and you might not have anything left on the other side. And so being more intentional about how you're living now, making sure that you feel like you're making kind of the best use of this one opportunity that you get in your life, with your family, with your friends, experiencing the world and culture and all of that. I love what you're doing, and I love that you're inspiring other doctors to do it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming, because it just feels, I think that's what it is, to live in alignment with what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Okay. So I have to know, where's your favorite place that you have lived?
My favorite place that I've lived is Bocas del Toro. It's the archipelago off the coast of Panama, where you ride your bike as transportation and you watch the dolphins, and I live on the ocean. I mean, it's just like, it's pure paradise. The people are lovely. So that's like my home away from home. Like last year I spent 5 months there just laying on my hammock watching the parrots.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if people are interested in what you're doing, if people are interested in potentially talking with you and following along on your journeys, where do they find you?
They can find me on Instagram at the Nomad MDs, on Facebook at the Nomad MDs, or on my website at thenomadmd.com.
Awesome. Okay, so you kind of touched on this earlier, but we do have a tradition here. The last question that we ask all of our guests is on this concept of wealth that matters, which you are very familiar with. What does wealth that matters mean to you?
For me, it means living in alignment with my truest values. And that means it's reflected in how I spend each and every day of my life.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. Because there's a nice accountability in the way you framed that too, where it's like every day, was I in alignment today? Like, how did I spend my time? How did I spend my energy? Was I present? Did I live it today? I love that. Well, thank you so much. This was such a great conversation. I enjoyed it so much. And what I especially enjoy about what I know our listeners will experience is this is such an intriguing concept. So many doctors, especially post-pandemic, medicine it's gotten tougher in a lot of ways. I'm hearing it from so many doctors. And so I've helped a number of doctors make a change, whether that was a new practice setting, whether that was a new structure, whether that was a new location, whether that was partial retirement, all of these things just to move away from that burnout and, try to get a little bit more life back. And so I love that you've taken it, almost to the extreme and can serve as an inspiration for a lot of our listeners about what's possible, but also are available to help them if this is something that they're like, oh my gosh, this is what I have been looking for. I want what she has. So I'm so excited to have this as a resource and you as a resource for our listeners as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Doctor's Eyes Only podcast. We hope today's conversation advanced your journey toward wealth that matters. Make sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss a single one of our amazing episodes. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Vestia Advisors LLC. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. It should not be construed as legal or tax advice and is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified attorney or tax advisor. This information is not an offer or a solicitation to buy or sell securities. Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Before investing, you should consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses associated with investment products. Investment decisions should be based on an individual's own goals, time horizon, and tolerance for risk. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Diversification and asset allocation do not ensure a profit or guarantee against loss. Consult your financial professional before making any investments. Investment advisory services offered through Vestia Personal Wealth Advisors, Vestia Retirement Plan Consultants, and Vestia Advisors LLC. Securities offered through Osdale Financial Partners, Inc., 5187 Utica Ridge Road, Davenport, Iowa, 52807. Member, FINRA, SIPC. Vestia Personal Wealth Advisors, Vestia Retirement Plan Consultants, Vestia Advisors LLC, and Osdale Financial Partners, Inc. are independently owned and operated.